ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to be here with you today, speaking to people who are so passionate about addressing the health needs of women and children as part of advancing the development agenda in Africa. We must make it clear, not only in Africa but around the world, that no society can advance when half of its citizens are left behind. Therefore, respect for the rights of women and children needs to be woven into every facet of society, from economic and political participation to access to education and maternal and child health. Because when women and children have equal opportunities and the full enjoyment of their rights, you strengthen an entire nation. While we have made progress in decreasing maternal and child mortality since 1990, in sub-Saharan Africa, women still face 1 in 16 chance of dying in childbirth, as you just saw from the last presentation. 1/3 of women there do not have access to antenatal care, and almost half of births there take place without a skilled birth attendant. Sub-Saharan Africa is almost home to highest rates of under 5 child mortality, the majority of which are from preventable diseases. As part of the Millennium Development Goals, we have managed to make some inroads against maternal mortality. But it is still true that in many countries in Africa, women continue to risk death to give birth. As the Minister of Health of Sierra Leone, I witnessed firsthand how improvement in maternal and child health could have an exponential effect on a country. During my time in office, I ramped up the government of Sierra Leone's free healthcare initiative, which the President had instituted to provide free, comprehensive healthcare for pregnant women, lactating mothers, and children under 5. I implemented a shipping and receiving system to cut down on the theft of drugs and other life-saving commodities, and created a network of grandmothers who acted as medical facility monitors in districts throughout the country. Their job was to visit local clinics daily and communicate with the Ministry of Health in Freetown the state of each clinic, whether it was clean and had adequate medical supplies, and whether staff were seeing patients in a timely manner. These grandmothers were an amazing resource because they were the most invested in making sure that the medical system worked, because it was their daughters who died in childbirth and their grandmother who were killed by preventable diseases. The result of these measures were immediate. There was a 20% increase in women delivering their babies in health facilities, a 3-fold increase in the number of children under 5 receiving health services, and a 50% reduction in the number of women dying from pregnancy-related conditions at public hospitals. What does it mean when they save the life of a mother or a child? It means you have 1 more entrepreneur, 1 more teacher, 1 more community leader, 1 more engineer, 1 more doctor, 1 more peacekeeper to help build and sustain vibrant communities and strong nations. It means you have children who live to see their 5th birthday and beyond, children who are not orphaned at childbirth, and children who grow up with the belief that they are valuable members of society, worth the investment and protection of their community. Doctors with African Quam has been doing just such life-saving work in the district of Pujo in Sierra Leone since 2011. This district is a remote one that was one of the areas hardest hit by the Civil War, and it is still dealing with the legacy of conflict in the form of estranged families and weak infrastructure. Pujo suffers from a shortage of health professionals, has only one medical facility, and lacks suitable roads for access to and from the hospital. As a result, only 6% of births are assisted by trained professionals, and the district has one of the highest rates of maternal and infant mortality in the country. The work that Doctors with Africa is doing helps mothers safely deliver children, and children stand a better chance of surviving labor and delivery. Their work there shows that providing health services is about more than addressing the physical well-being of a person. It can also be a delivery system for human rights and human dignity. But empowering communities through women and children does not stop at the provision of adequate health care. We have to ensure that children have access to education, that they have access to proper nutrition, that they are not discriminated against because of their family's economic class or social status, and that their rights are taken seriously and enforced by people throughout society. The attempt to marginalize women and children can take many forms, such as those I just mentioned. But one of the most difficult attacks waged on them is the physical and psychological assault of sexual violence in conflicts. As the United Nations Special Representative of the Sectarian and Sexual Violence in Conflict, my goal is nothing less than the eradication of this terrible crime. An attack on women and children during or post-conflict is more than an attack on an individual. It is an attack on the very fabric of society. It is an attack on families, communities, on the rule of law, and an assault on the belief in your government to protect you. In such, it is an attack on dignity and humanity. An estimated 200,000 women have been raped in the DRC since 1990. At the Panzi Hospital in Eastern DRC, 10% of the births there are children born of rape. In the Dadaab refugee camp in Kenya, which is the biggest refugee camp in the world, 70% of women there have been raped. In Sierra Leone, my own country, an estimated 65,000 women were victims of sexual violence during the conflict. In Central African Republic, women and girls are kidnapped and held as sex slaves by militia members. In Mali, women have been raped in public as punishment for violation of Sharia law. In Liberia, rape is now the most prevalent crime, a grim reminder of the wartime rape that happened there. I have seen victims as young as 6 months old and as old as 70 years. To strive towards the goal of eradication of sexual violence in conflict, I have a 6-point agenda. First, there must be an end to impunity for perpetrators and justice for victims. Rape during war must be taken seriously and condemned as a war crime, not written off as an inevitable byproduct of war. Second, we must protect and empower the people who are vulnerable to this crime. This means that sexual violence must be treated as a serious peace and security issue that warrants a security response. And women must not be seen just as victims, but as stakeholders who will be included in all measures taken to combat sexual violence. Thirdly, I work to strengthen the political will to fight this scourge. We must engage political leaders to implement the Security Council resolutions that are the foundations of my mandates. Fourth, I coordinate the United Nations response to this silent epidemic so that there is consistency, coordination and harmony of the international community strategy in dealing with this crime. A rape victim does not know about Security Council resolutions. They simply know whether their country and the United Nations are providing the security they need and the justice they deserve. There also needs to be a holistic approach to victims of sexual violence, as this crime affects every aspect of their life. Ultimately, we need to have standardized best practices that are used in responding to sexual violence and its aftermath. Fifth, I raise awareness worldwide of rape as a tactic of war. It is important that people understand what it means when rape is employed strategically as a tool of war and people's bodies are used for military gain or political advantage. This weapon is as effective as any bullet and as destructive as any bomb, and it has to be addressed with the same determination as other deadly weapons of war. Lastly, I place an emphasis on national ownership, leadership, and responsibility. Solutions cannot be imposed from the outside, and we can pass all the resolutions we want in New York, but until governments implement these laws at the national level, we will not be successful in our fight. What is required more than anything else is a change in the attitudes of everyone, from political leaders to activists to journalists to citizens. Every sector of society needs to understand the devastating impact of the scourge and be determined to end it. To this end, I have deepened my engagement with government officials and NGOs as well as rebel groups, including in the African states. I also work closely with my United Nations counterpart, such as United Nations Action Against Sexual Violence in Conflict, the 13 agency entity that helps to harness the comparative advantage of each other to bring the full force of UN resources to bear on this issue. This multi-sectoral approach focuses on the holistic needs of survivors, from medical and psychosocial care to access to legal services to development of livelihood opportunities. The team of experts, rule of law and sexual violence in conflict, also works to help build the legal capacity in countries to combat this crime by training the police, prosecutors, and the judiciary in how to address this rights abuse within international, regional, and national framework. Sexual violence in conflict is a grave violation of women's and children's rights, and it is as old as war itself. But I don't believe that ending this scourge is mission impossible. I say this not as a UN Under-Secretary General, but as someone who lived through a devastating civil war in my own country. I know what it means to rebuild a country day by day, brick by brick, after a decade of conflict. I took the testimonies of women who had experienced horrible atrocities during the war, including women in the province of Kailau in Sierra Leone. They were survivors of wartime sexual violence, and their lives had been utterly devastated. Many of them had lost loved ones. Some of them had been rejected by their families, and all of them faced a future with little or no economic prospect or chance for recovery. We partnered with an international NGO to provide grants to help them start small businesses in farming, animal husbandry, and trade in local goods. I have kept in touch with these women and seen the change in them and their community, and it has been remarkable. After the war, they faced a grim and uncertain future. Today, they are not beggars but business owners. They are not outcasts but entrepreneurs. Many of the women have been so successful that they have hired staff, including ex-combatants, to work for them. And the changes aren't just in the economic sector. In the 2012 election, Kailau fielded the highest number of female candidates for political office in any district in Sierra Leone. In short, these women not only survived, but they overcame the horrible injustice that was done to them. Imagine that in just 15 years, my country has gone from a violent civil war to a place where young people have women who are successful business owners and community leaders as role model. This is where the real change happens. In every village, every town, and every city, where children see day in and day out that women are invaluable members of society whose rights are respected. My own personal history also tells me that we can win this fight to protect and promote the rights of girls and women. I am confident because I stand here before you as someone who knows what it means to be vulnerable, to be written off because I was born a girl, and to be targeted for being a woman who spoke out and stood up. I am the only child of a woman who had no formal education, and I come from a traditional family in which men were the heads of household, and women were considered their property without equal rights. In my village, girls were not expected to go to school, but my mother insisted that I will not be denied an education because of my gender. My father wanted to marry me off at the age of 12, and when my mother refused, he threw us out of our home and out of his life. My mother stood up against years of tradition and broke cultural norms because she knew that education was a golden key. A golden key that can open doors to a world full of possibility and hope, or a prison key that can be used to lock people out of opportunities and confine them in a cage of poverty and marginalization. By the virtue of the schooling that I received, I am now considered the head of my family. When decisions need to be made, people in my village, both men and women, look to me. This is the transformative power of education, that in one generation, a woman can go from being considered chattel to being in charge. I know what it means to be threatened by rebels who vow to rape and kill me, to silence me and stop me from working to restore peace and democracy in my country. I know what it means to look your child in the eye and tell him to run for his life, because you may not make it out alive, and what it means to have your home looted and destroyed. I know what it feels like to flee your country as a refugee with nothing but the cloth on your back in the hopes of making it to safety and seeking asylum in a land not your own. The fact that I can stand here today to tell you my story is what makes me confident that we can achieve equal rights for women and children, provide them with adequate health care, and end sexual violence, sexual and gender-based violence against them. Distinguished guests, friends, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, in closing, I would like to thank you for all the work you are doing to advance women's rights and gender equality. We can win this fight, but only if we continue to challenge governments, society, and ourselves to end the inequality that keep women, and by extension our communities, from reaching our full potential. In the words of environmentalist and Nobel Peace Prize winner Margaret Maathai, in the course of history, there comes a time when humanity is called to shift to a new level of consciousness, to reach a higher moral ground, a time when we have to shed our fear and give hope to everyone. That time is now.